I was born in Spokane, Washington. I grew up on Pleasant Prairie, which is an area north of Millwood. My dad's name was Weldon, Lancaster, and my mother's name was Vivian, and her maiden name was Swearingen. And her family, they came out originally from Missouri, and it was probably in the mid to late 1800s. It was just the time that people were kind of migrating west. His dad had the property that my dad inherited, the farmland on Pleasant Prairie. He farmed grain and hay. It was his main crops. And we just grew everything for our own use, and if we had extra, then it was sold off for extra income. Well, of course, in the field I drove horses. You know, originally when we started farming, it was horses, no tractors. You have to feed them and get them ready to go to the field, and I also had to help with, we had some cows to milk and helped with the milking. We had what they call a cream separator that we ran the milk through and separated the cream, and maybe once a week we'd take what excess cream we had to the creamery in Hilliard, and it was just interesting to see all those trains coming and going. I had a sister 3 years younger than me, so I picked on her some, but she usually got even. But we usually got along pretty good. We didn't have the things to play with that they do now, so we made up our own toys. One toy that we had was a long stick with a cross piece on the end of it down next to the ground, and then we had this little steel flat wheel, and we'd see how far we could go with that. Just little things like that we enjoyed doing. We'd have picnics in the summer and family get-togethers, and I can remember my folks in the wintertime played a lot of cards like pinochle. When the families would get together, that was their main thing to do, was play pinochle. The name of the school was Pleasant Prairie Grade School. It's still there. It was a brick building, and it had, we went through our first 8 grades there. There was two different rooms. You had first grade through 4th, and then 4th through 8th. We walked to school. It was probably close to 2 miles from home to school. And of course, when the weather was good, it was really no problem. But in the winter time, I can remember when Dad, if it was really cold weather, Dad would usually walk together with us to school to be sure that we got there without getting too cold. When I graduated from grade school, then I went to West Valley High School in Millwood, which is in the valley. I had a bad experience when I was a sophomore. I contacted rheumatic fever. Now, if you don't hear much about rheumatic fever because they have different drugs to take care of it, but I was in bed at St. Luke's Hospital for at least 2 months. They wouldn't let me up to walk around even. And then from there, they sent me to a children's home, and I was the oldest child there. The rest of them were they were just little kids. And I'm a 16-year-old sophomore, and it was pretty tough. And so I missed out on actually 2 years of school before I got back. I started with a class of 44, and I ended up graduating with a class of 46. We were high school classmates. My wife, Melba's, her family, we were going to the church at Pleasant Prairie, and that's where we first met. Our wedding day, we went to St. John, Washington. Her parents went with us, and my parents. The 6 of us all drove in the same vehicle. Well, we were married in December of 47, and Kelly was born December 6th of 48. We were renting a little house in the valley at Millwood. We used to go skiing on Mount Spokane in the wintertime. And of course, my wife was pregnant, but there was nothing said that when I left that morning to go skiing. And then I get a call from the lodge that I needed to call home. So I call home and I get the word that my wife, she'd called my dad and she was on her way to the hospital. So the time I got home, I missed out on the birth. I was really interested in farming, but of course when I got out of high school, I worked for a farmer's co-op for several years, and then I finally got to the point where I either had to leave there or end up in a higher position job, and I could see the handwriting on the wall that I would probably never be a farmer if I didn't quit that job. So I did. I quit that job and got a small farm up in the Deer Park area where I got my start. I had 700 laying hens, and of course we had to grade and candle the eggs and sell the eggs. My wife Melba, her brother lived in Deer Park, so we communicated with them quite often. We'd go back and forth, and when we first got out there, of course we didn't have television, and they had television, so that was a big deal for us to go into Deer Park and watch their television. Well, we were there for, I think, about 4 years maybe. Greg was born there, yeah, Shelley and Greg. Jesse Cronquist, who was a bachelor, he knew my folks real well, and he came up and offered me a deal to come down back here to the foothills where I live now and take over his farm. And so I think it was probably about 1952 or 3, we decided to move down here and take over his farm. By that time, we'd pretty well got acquainted with people, our neighbors in Deer Park, and it wasn't real easy to leave. But of course, I grew up in this area, so it was not hard to come back here.